You have to get out of that chair now, or you'll hurt yourself. Tyler's cheerful voice rang out from behind me as I struggled to control the wheelchair, desperately pulling the brakes with all my strength. Tyler didn't care much about money, but today was supposed to be about celebrating our love. Yet, as I fought with the speeding wheelchair, I felt nothing but anger, not sadness. Suddenly, the chair got stuck, and I was thrown from it, landing with a loud thud before everything went black. When I woke up the next morning, I found myself in a hospital bed. Tyler was crying on the bed next to mine. After a while, he noticed I was awake and tried to comfort me, his voice shaky. "Amy, are you okay?" "I'm just so relieved," he said, managing a strained smile. Then, his tone shifted as he began recounting how he was hit by a car, losing his leg in the process. His eyes welled up as he revealed his amputated leg, tucked under the blanket. "You're going to help me, right? We're married, after all," he said, looking at me expectantly. I declined firmly. Tyler stared at me in disbelief. "Who will help me, then?" he asked, his voice filled with shock. I took a deep breath and began explaining. "I'm Amy, 45 years old, and I've always been an active person. I used to compete in national swimming competitions, but about 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a condition that weakened my left leg. Now, I need a wheelchair to get around." Tyler and I met at a group date, fell in love, and got married after 3 years of dating. Everything was fine until I became disabled. That's when Tyler started changing. I continued, sharing how Tyler began asking for money from my family to make our home wheelchair accessible and hire a caregiver. When I told him I planned to use my savings for that, he got upset, worried it might affect his inheritance. He tried to apologize later, saying he was just worried about future expenses, but I didn't believe him. Tyler's focus seemed to be more on money than anything else. Despite my doubts, I tried to convince myself that his behavior was just his usual tightness with money. But as time went on, he kept bringing up insurance policies and inheritance, suggesting we upgrade our coverage. His constant focus on financial matters made me uncomfortable. In the end, I decided to use my savings and a work bonus to make the house more accessible and hired a cleaning service 3 times a week. The woman in charge was pleasant, and I enjoyed chatting with her during breaks. But Tyler didn't like her. He criticized everything she did, from folding laundry to washing dishes. His constant complaints finally pushed me to a breaking point. One day, I snapped. Tyler's response left me speechless. He told me he would deduct the cost of the housekeeper from our living expenses, meaning I would have to cover the extra expense since he planned to keep the money for himself. I couldn't believe it. Our living expenses were already tight, and there was no way I could take on more. Tyler, however, didn't seem concerned. He assumed that since I was working, I should foot the bill, even though my income was not enough to cover such a large increase. He agreed to the extra expense, but only if I made sure to save that $1,000 properly. His cheerful attitude made my anxiety worse. Unfortunately, my fears came true. Tyler stopped complaining about the housekeeper, but he also stopped helping with any household chores. I reminded him that we still needed to pitch in, even with hired help, but he brushed it off. "We're paying for it, so they should do everything," he said. He started spending more time away from home, barely speaking to me when we did cross paths. His face was always disgusted. Thoughts of divorce started to creep into my mind. Then, out of nowhere, Tyler suggested we visit the botanical garden to see the cherry blossoms. I was taken aback, but his cheerful mood during the outing momentarily soothed my troubled thoughts. Maybe the problem was that we hadn't been communicating enough, I thought optimistically. But as we walked, Tyler dropped a bombshell. He told me he was out of money and urgently needed my insurance payout. Panicked, I realized he was pushing my wheelchair downhill without my consent. Despite my best efforts to stop the chair, Tyler's voice echoed merrily behind me, urging me to hurry. But I couldn't control the speed, and the wheelchair hit something, throwing me off. I lost consciousness again. The next morning, I woke up in a hospital room. Tyler was crying on the bed next to me. When he saw that I was awake, he rushed to speak with a hopeful smile. "Amy, you're okay. I'm so glad," he said, before adding, "I got hit by a car. My leg." He became emotional, revealing the missing leg under his blanket. "You'll help me now, right? We're married, aren't we?" I refused, my voice steady. Tyler stared, speechless, unable to comprehend my response. Why would I help someone who pushed me down a hill just to get insurance money? I said, my voice firm. It was a moment of madness. I regret it, he stammered. Sorry doesn't fix everything. You were supposed to save $1,000 a month for me. What happened? I asked, my tone sharp. I've been doing that, Tyler replied weakly. Oh really? Then pay for my hospital stay with that money, I said. Tyler panicked. His bank account was nearly empty. I knew this because I handled our finances and kept track of all our accounts. To my shock, I found that Tyler had been sending money to another woman. I hired a detective and uncovered the truth. Tyler had been having an affair and had a child with his mistress. The money he'd been sending was for child support. A 4-year-old? That's an adorable age. Have you been visiting her? How long have you known? I asked. Tyler was stunned. Then, I dropped another truth on him. Really? I was shocked to learn you're paying child support for someone else's child, I said with a bitter laugh. Tyler was confused, thinking the child was his. I couldn't help but laugh at his bewildered expression. What are you talking about? That kid is mine, Tyler snapped. I laughed harder. You can't even have children, I said, relishing his confused look. You really thought I was the reason we couldn't have kids? I never told you. But your father knows the truth. Tyler's face turned pale. We've been trying infertility treatments for 3 years since we got married. Tyler finally took the test, and it turned out the issue was with him. But my father-in-law and I agreed not to tell you. He was worried you wouldn't handle it well, I revealed. After explaining everything, Tyler suddenly grabbed his phone. Did you have an affair? The kid isn't mine, is it? Tyler shouted into the phone. I realized he was calling his mistress. They argued back and forth, but Tyler seemed to get nowhere. As I listened to him accuse her of having an affair too, I couldn't stop myself from laughing at the absurdity of it all. Ignoring Tyler's frantic conversation, I shifted the conversation back to us. Do you remember when we signed those papers to save the $1,000 you spent? I asked. Tyler brushed it off, but I sighed, knowing he would probably try to change his story. I showed him a picture on my phone. The document clearly states that if there's any misuse, divorce, or if the money is spent before the issue is uncovered, the full amount must be paid to me, Amy. It's all checked and signed, and it's notarized, right? Tyler looked frustrated, then met my gaze with pleading eyes. Please, Amy, I was out of my mind. Don't say divorce, okay? And I can't pay back such a large sum. Divorce is inevitable, but don't worry, you can pay it off in installments. Seeing him like this, playing the victim, stirred a mix of emotions in me. I sighed and called out to someone standing at the entrance of the hospital room. Come in, Dad. Tyler yelled in protest as my father-in-law walked in, his face filled with anger. This is the end of our relationship. Tyler, confused, asked, What are you talking about? My father-in-law walked toward me and apologized. I'm truly sorry. I don't expect your forgiveness. Feel free to file a complaint. I'm just relieved Amy is safe. Thank you. I saw the tears in his eyes and glared at Tyler, knowing he was the cause of my father-in-law's pain. Don't you feel anything seeing this? It's your fault, always spending more than I can make, while your rich family is so stingy. I don't know why I married you, I replied, my voice low. So it was about the money all along, huh? Tyler looked taken aback. I forced a smile. Married for money and now having to pay it back. Huh? Shut up. I'm not paying. Too bad. The payment's non-negotiable, my father-in-law said firmly, making Tyler pale and tremble. A middle-aged doctor in a white coat entered, breaking the tension, and handed me a document. Why aren't you getting treatment for your leg? He asked, looking confused. I glanced at Tyler, who avoided my gaze. If you have surgery, you'll be able to walk again. Didn't you hear that when the diagnosis was made? The doctor continued. I didn't hear it, I replied, looking at Tyler, who stayed silent. Realizing something was off, I turned to the doctor. Can you tell me the diagnosis directly? I didn't catch it earlier. The doctor explained that I had temporary paralysis from a herniated disc and with rehabilitation, I could walk again. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had believed Tyler's lies about my condition, but now I knew the truth. Tyler, There's nothing left between us. What do you have to say for yourself? My father-in-law shouted. But Tyler just broke down in tears, overwhelmed. In that moment, I realized that if I were free from him, I could truly move forward in life. You always put yourself first. If I were in a wheelchair, I'd never go anywhere, right? Well, guess what? Your selfishness kept me in a wheelchair for 2 years, even when I could have had surgery to get better. And you kept quiet. That's the worst. Tyler slumped, exhausted. I gave him a cold look, and both the doctor and my father-in-law were visibly angry at him for keeping me from the treatment I needed. So, Amy, would you like me to explain the surgery to you tomorrow? The doctor asked. Yes, please, I said, my mood lifting. The doctor smiled at me, offering hope for a brighter future. I'll have the nurse prepare to separate your rooms, he said. No, don't separate me from Amy, Tyler protested loudly, but the doctor ignored him and left. Amy, you're not really divorcing me, right? I've made mistakes, but please, think about our situation, Tyler begged. Despite my father-in-law yelling at him, Tyler stood firm, and after about 10 minutes of silence, I reluctantly spoke. Then I'll work, and you'll handle the chores. If you need anything, you pay for it, and I'll deduct that from the living expenses. Tyler protested, saying he couldn't live that way, but I reminded him that's exactly what he had said to me. Realizing the weight of his own words, Tyler's face turned pale as he froze. My father-in-law was also shocked, finally realizing the horrible things his son had said to me. Well, from now on, let's let lawyers handle the rest, including compensation, I said, ready to move on. Wait, Amy, Tyler called out as a nurse entered. It seems I'm moving rooms, so Tyler can't keep barging in, I said. Tyler screamed as I left, his cries fading behind me as the door shut. After being escorted by the nurse, I met my father-in-law's eyes, and we exchanged a brief nod. That was the last time I saw Tyler. Months later, I received divorce papers from him through a lawyer, and the divorce was finalized. I heard Tyler was feeling down and was under my father-in-law's strict supervision. Although he managed to keep his job, word of the divorce spread, and his colleagues, who had once been concerned about his injury, now looked at him coldly. Tyler brought this on himself, but I heard him complain about being harassed by his coworkers. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. He hadn't changed at all. Since the divorce, I still occasionally see my father-in-law. At first, he seemed apologetic, but lately, he's returning to his usual self. I found out that Tyler's affair partner was actually married and had a child with her real husband. I sent proof of the affair and child support transfers to her husband, which caused a massive dispute and led to their divorce. Although I received a resentful letter at my lawyer's office, I ignored it. Meanwhile, I had surgery immediately after the divorce and spent 6 months in the hospital for rehabilitation. Thanks to my father-in-law's help, I could continue working while staying in a private room. After being discharged, I continued physical therapy and checkups, and now I can walk with a cane. Lately, I've been taking walks around the house. I even exchanged contact details with someone I met during a walk and promised to go for a meal. He's a kind person who helped me when I tripped over a rock. These days, the excitement of a fresh new spring fills me with hope, and I feel unstoppable. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Stay amazed.